men and women who in prior years may not have survived, but the nature of what we're able to do in the field medically with our medics and so forth, but then also the nature of warfare has changed. So a lot of these individuals, on the traumatic brain side, physically may be okay, but they've suffered, real concussive injuries, of which sometimes we can pick up some of the immediate effects, but we don't know the long-term effects, and they are doing remarkable research. So on both ends, one of the reasons why, one of the things I'm most proud about is the work that we do with veterans, because we know we have a lot of veterans that live in our community. And Matt Chicotto, my district director, is a Iraq War veteran, a wounded warrior who came to us as a fellow and really has done remarkable work representing me and representing the veterans, because he understands the sacrifice that they've made, but then also the importance of serving them. Part of the reason why I focus on VA issues so much is, as a doctor who has done some training in the VA system, it's a vital support system for our veterans, and work with Councilmember McGarvey and the entire city council, because we've got Mather here in our own VA hospital, and if you haven't had a chance to go visit Mather Veterans Village, it's a pretty remarkable village. And just talking to some of these veterans who, particularly Vietnam War veterans, who said, when they returned home, they felt like no one welcomed them home. And for the first time in their lives, they felt like they had a place to live and they were being welcomed back to America and thanked for their service. So we ought to do that. So we certainly can take a look and do some of that. So, Linda, you had a question.
I did. So I wanted to thank you for mentioning TBI and the relationship that the war in Iraq and Afghanistan have caused due to the concussion and the injury that our members of service do sustain. Because there is significant risk for those members, you also mentioned that it's taking longer for veterans to get care. My father was a veteran, and he had Lewy body disease, and we weren't able to get him into the system soon enough. So if you are reelected, what is your plan to improve diagnosis and the delivery of service to our members of service and their families that need that support?
So a couple things. First, Linda, thank you for your advocacy on behalf of patients in Alzheimer's disease. You're tireless, so thank you for that. In terms of thinking about it, I think there are a couple things. So, a simple thing that I think we ought to do with our active duty servicemen and women is, before they leave active duty and transition into their civilian lives, they ought to have an exit interview. There ought to be a simple evaluation. Now, we have an epidemic right now, 20 to 22, depending on which report you're looking at, veterans commit suicide every day. That should be a national emergency right now, and we should be doing everything we can to stop that. Part of that starts with doing an assessment, making sure that if there are any signs of even low-level brain injury, et cetera, and even if not, at least you're getting a baseline. So if a year later or 2 years down the road there's personality changes or depression or other things, you have something that you can go back to. Secondly, part of why that's important is we ought to be asking them questions. When you leave here, what's your plan? Are you going to go to college? Do you have a job lined up? Is your family ready to bring you back into their lives? Because being in an active war situation and then transitioning to civilian life is not an easy transition. We're not doing enough of that. So that doesn't solve it. But if we're uncovering PTSD, depression, suicidal ideations, we ought to be plugging those individuals into care much more quickly than saying, okay, well, one day you're active duty, the next day you're a civilian, and you've got to figure out how to navigate the system. That isn't caring for folks. And to me, I think there's some simple things that we could do that would better help our veterans navigate the system. We ought to be finding them jobs, right? So if they say, well, I don't have a job lined up, great, let's figure out what your skill sets are. We're working on some proposals that say, look, if you were an Army medic, you may not have that licensure to be an EMT and so forth, but you were pretty much doing that job in the military. Let's give them some credit for that, and then as opposed to saying, well, you've got to go back to school now for 2 years to get your EMT license. If you were doing that, let's give them credit for that. If you were a certified welder, and we've been working, to make sure those skill sets are recognized. Again, none of this costs a lot of money. This says if they were a welder functioning at a high level in the Army, again, they may not have that license because they were trained while they were in the military. So then to say, well, you've got to go back to the most basic classes doesn't make any sense. So simple things like that. I mean, I could probably take one more question, please.
Thank you. In your view, what do you think Congress should be doing to support fuller employment by helping the formation of new business?
So a couple things. I think I touched on this, but one of the things that our group, the Problem Solvers, has been doing is taking a look at the regulatory environment and thinking about how you get rid of outdated regulations. Because the problem is a law gets passed again in 1970 that maybe makes sense in 1970, but we're now in 2016, and it doesn't make sense, and it hinders your ability to grow your business. I think particularly for small businesses, when you're in that startup phase, all of your capital should be going back into your business, because it's those first few years when businesses either succeed or fail. And in that time period, so we have talked about startup tax incentives and tax credits where you have a much lower tax burden, so your money is going back into your business. R&D tax credits and things like that, things that we can do to relieve some of the tax burden, particularly in that early phase. Another area, you guys have heard me say this, I'll say it again. The Affordable Care Act is not what I would have done as a healthcare expert, because it doesn't adequately address the cost of healthcare. It is what it is. It became law before I came to Congress. But now we've got to fix and make it better. And one of the laws that I championed with a doctor from Louisiana, Charles Busani, is a delay of the health insurance tax. I'm grateful that we were able to pass a 1-year delay. That health insurance tax doesn't add health care. It doesn't do anything. It's just a pass-through. And for the average family of 4, it's about a $400 hit. Or if you're providing your employees with health care, it's about $150, $200 per employee. Now, it doesn't do anything. It's an accounting gimmick. And I think we ought to be doing everything we can to lower the cost of health care. So we got a 1-year delay of that implementation passed last December and became law. We're working on trying to make a permanent delay and get rid of that tax. Because right now, I think the most critical thing, and this is something that impacts small business owners, and actually the largest companies in America, after payroll, your second biggest expense is the cost of benefits. And you have no control over the cost of benefits, and the urgency now is how do we actually bring down the cost of health care? So.
I have a question. I hate to give you one more thing, but you get back to Congress. In 1977, 60% of people in Congress had military backgrounds. Today, 16%. Could you get a committee that would include mainly the people who have a military background now? They would have a better understanding of what the veterans need, what they're going through, and it would help us a lot more. Maybe you'd get more in Congress a lot faster.
Yeah, I think so. At least on the Democratic side, we have an opportunity for Tim Waltz, who was a colonel from Minnesota, to become the ranking member on the Veterans Committee. And he's the highest ranking enlisted man in Congress in our history. So I totally agree with you. It's not just on the veterans. We should have people who have an expertise there, helping set policy. on the healthcare committees, folks like myself with a deep background in healthcare. So you ought to, and just more broadly, I think to your point, Bob, I think if we had more people who actually had a full career, and then, so I've had a successful career as a physician, done a lot of different things in healthcare. Now it's a chance to give back. This, you asked me 10 years ago if this is what I was going to be doing. It's like, are you kidding me? And I don't have to do this, but I feel compelled to do it. If we had more teachers, folks that have been in the classroom, I think we'd get education policy better. If we had more nurses and doctors, I think we'd get healthcare better. If we had more small business owners, I think you'd have more people that understood how difficult it is to start a small business and grow that small business. Part of the reason why we do a lot of work both with the chamber and with the Small Business Administration, making sure that